So now it's time to test the armature a little bit more, find and fix some problems that would occur eventually, and create the final pose for the character so it's ready to render. And as we saw before, the belt here caused a little bit of a problem there. So if we now Control Tab for the pose mode on the armature and try to move the leg a little bit down, we can see that we are dragging the belt, which should not happen. So let me release this and we'll have a look at the belt itself. So Control Tab to exit the pose mode, select the belt, and now we can go to the weight paint mode. So Control Tab and choose weight paint here. And basically you'll need to check through these vertex groups for some of these bones, whether there is some weight applied. So obviously this belt should have some weight from the spine bones. As you can see here, the spine is 0,1, have a weight there, and the pelvis bones. So if we check the pelvis left and right, this is correct, but we need to look for some of the bones on the foot there that are dragging this down. And we don't need to click through all of these vertex groups since they're named after the bones. So we can just look for the left foot here. So let's click that and let's check whether there's some weight applied there. Not really. So let's continue. And I can see here on the toe, there's some weight applied. So that's really not great right here. And basically that happened if you look this from the side. The toe is quite in the front there and belt as well, so maybe there wasn't any bone and some of the weight got applied here. So we can easily fix this by either painting the weight away. So I can show you how to do that. First of all, I would toggle X-ray so we better see the weight on all sides of the belt, and then we can check the actual drawing tool. And here in the advanced option, you can see that there's a checkbox for front faces only. And if you uncheck that, you can basically paint through the whole object. And right now, you just reduce the weight to 0 and paint over this part here. You can see how the weight disappears there. And you can make this interactive. So if I go to the object mode and then again to the pose mode, and drag this feet a little bit down, you can see how only this part of the belt is dragged. And here we still have a lot of the weight painted. So let me go back to the weight paint mode. And you can paint over this and see how it returns to its place. So that's what we want. There's the other way how you could do that. So for example, if I don't want the belt to be affected in any way by the feet, we can just go to the edit mode, go to the vertex groups, and just click remove on the vertex group. And if I do this on the right toe as well, so let's find the toe R vertex group and click remove. That means we are removing all of these vertices. You have to select them, of course, before that. So we are removing all of these vertices from this vertex group and from this one as well. So if we now tab out, you can see this no longer moves towards the foot because we removed all of the vertices from these weights. So that's about the belt. And I really like how all the rest of the model behaves. Basically, there is a little bit of an overlap here, but we'll fix that by giving some volume to the cloth there. So all in all, this works great, and we can test out some other things. You can of course test the fingers as well. You can see there are separate controls for fingers here that you can rotate. But there's another interesting way that they work. If you scale them up and down, these controls, you will curl the fingers. So this is one of the great things that Rigify does for you, where you can just create the bones and all of these controls get created for you. And maybe this is the right moment to talk about some of these controls that Rigify offers. So here on the right panel, if you don't have it visible, just press N to slide it out. You can see there are buttons for rig layers. And here basically you are enabling and disabling visibility for this control. So if you feel like this is cluttered and you have a bunch of these gizmos there you don't want to have there, or you don't want to see them, just enable or disable some of these layers. And then if you select some of these red controls, which are inverse kinematics controls, there are some more options here. And basically you can rig the hand with the forward kinematics. And forward kinematics means that if you move some bone, basically it just controls the angle between itself and the parent bone. If you're using inverse kinematics, then it means by moving the bone, you are modifying the angles on other parent bones as well. So here, for example, if I move this up, you can see we are modifying this angle as well and this. So by moving one bone, we are actually controlling these angles in a backward way. That's why it's called inverse kinematics. Let me go back. And you can easily switch from inverse kinematics control to forward kinematics by sliding this control here. So right now, if you slide this all the way to 1, we effectively disabled the influence of this inverse kinematics control, and the hand now works in the forward kinematics, and you can control this by selecting these green bones. And here you can see you have separately moved some of these, and basically they work in a forward way. So you move the angle on the parent bone and it moves all the other bones, and then you can go down on the bones and position them separately. So let me just slide this all the way back, and here you can see the forward kinematics bones or the forward kinematics controls are still in that position we left them. So with the slider here you can change the influence between the forward and inverse kinematics, and same applies for legs as well. So let's go back to fixing the armature once again, and there's just one more issue. I think all of this is rigged quite nicely, but when we move this, basically the pendant goes inside the body. So we can try something to fix that. Let me press Ctrl Tab to go out of the pose mode. And normally you would probably want the pendant to behave physically correct, so it would have its own bone structure with some physics and some gravity and stuff like that, but that's really out of the scope of this illustration. First of all, I think we can join these two objects and reparent them to the armature, so the weights get painted once again, so we don't lose this connection right here. So let's just try that. For a second, I will shift click these two objects, press Ctrl J, and now shift click the armature, Ctrl P, and do the automatic weights there. And now if we go to the weight paint mode, we can check these vertex groups once again, and I suspect we'll have to apply some of the weights for some of these spine bones. So let's just check, and the spine one should control this area right here. We can double check by selecting the body and go to the weight paint mode, and you can see the spine 01 is painted here in the back and a little bit on the belly, and then it goes up like this. So I guess we can fix some of these quirks by painting some weights for these two vertex groups. So let's go to the weight paint mode for the talisman once again. Let's now try to apply some of that spine 001 weights. I will use F to increase the radius, and let's modify the weight to something like 0.5. I don't want to go all the way to 1. Let's just click some weights here. Be careful, you can see how this moves up. So I guess I like what we done to the talisman object itself, that it gets moved by the spine bone. But here this is a little too much, so we can reduce the weight here and try to ease it out a little bit. And then switch to the spine 0.2 and apply some of those as well. And maybe then we can reduce the effect the spine 1 has on this rope. And I think this could work quite well. Let's see what it does. I will go to the object mode, select the armature, Control Tab for the pose mode, and let's see what we have done here. I think this is a little bit better. So looks great. Doesn't behave physically correct, but you get my point here. I'm just trying to make it as good as possible without adding unnecessary complexity, since the result of this should be just a static illustration. In my opinion, this is a great result for the short amount of time it took. And here you can see how you can use the armature and the pose to basically make the character taller altogether. So there's a lot of flexibility in that. And imagine what would you have to do if you would need to move the mesh manually or something like that. And now I want to go back. So let's select all by pressing A, click pose, clear transform, and all. So this is the rest pose we had before. Now our character is ready, and we can do some small adjustments like I mentioned here in the back, where I want to give some volume to this cloth. You can remember we removed the solidify modifier there. I wanted a small amount of geometry for the weight painting as possible, and sometimes it can get weird when you try to apply weights to double-sided geometry with automatic weights. This way we have already this piece of cloth weighted, and now if we go in the edit mode by pressing tab and press Alt E, extrude along normals, we can extrude some of the geometry, and this way these new extruded vertices have same weights as those that we are extruding from. So now if we check the pose, this still works, and we don't have any issues here in the back. Of course it can break if you do like too wild stuff there. And remember, this character doesn't have like long legs or something, so if you do some aggressive movements here, it starts to break very soon. And we can now extrude some of this cloth here as well. So I will tab in, press Alt E and extrude along normals. We can go the other way, and let's make sure to select all and press Shift N so we have correct normals. Okay, and now it's time to do that pose. So I will go to the texture paint mode, but go back to the object. I just wanted to have the image editor here so I can load up the reference. So let's just load up our reference image, but not the illustration one, but the final render. And this is the pose we are going for right here. So let's select the armature, Control Tab for the pose mode. We'll need to rotate the camera a little bit, so we have the angle right, as you can see here. So I think the correct angle is something like this. Okay, and now we can select this bone here and move it towards the front, because he's a little bit leaning forward. And we can now rotate this on the X, so R, X, and rotate. Maybe not so much in the front, so G and Y, and go back a little bit. So he is hunching a little bit here. And now we can let the arm go down a little bit, so move it like this. R, Y twice, and rotate the inverse kinematics controller. And if you go to the X-ray, you will see that there are some adjustment bones like this that you can use to freely adjust your mesh. And it's very useful when you do some steep angles or something like that, or when you want to do some animation stretches, you know, some cartoony stuff. But here we can use it to actually make an elbow go a little bit outside, and then make this closer to the body like this, and it's a little bit more rotated like that. We can see he has the thumb bent inside and the fingers as well a little bit. So let's do that, and as I mentioned before, we can use these controls. So select one of these finger controls, press S to scale, and bend them just a tiny bit like this. And I will rotate this a little bit, maybe we can move them closer together like that, and scale this one as well. Okay, and rotate this bone, move it a little bit to the front. So yeah, just try to find some pose that you really like. You can adjust the position of the shoulder here, and try to find something that works for you based on the reference. Okay, and now the front arm. So we can take the control bone and move it towards the front, and of course change its rotation, so RY twice, so we are rotating around this axis. And then if we rotate from the top, we'll see that we will need to rotate it like this. And move some of these outside. Okay, looks great so far. I want to keep the palm open, but just for some visual interest, we can maybe bend these fingers just a tiny bit. And maybe play with the position of the head. So if we rotate it a little bit and towards the front, so it basically kind of looks like in the direction of the extended hand. So it looks like he's really reaching out to those wisps or something. And maybe move this to the side a little bit. Okay, I really like this, and to be honest, I like this pose even more than the original one, so I will go with this. Of course, you're free to play with the pose, come up with something you really like, and I'll meet you in the next chapter.